Well, Alex, welcome to DAO Talk. Thanks so much for joining me.
Well, thanks for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Yeah, of course. Would love to get started just with a quick background so everyone who's listening has a good sense of who you are and the work that you've done in the space. So, yeah, tell me about how you got into crypto slash Web3 slash DAOs and then what you're working on today.
So, my name is Alex Van de Sande, and I think DAOs is one of the things that attracted me into crypto. I had heard about Bitcoin, I started following in the distance, and well, it's interesting, like a cool like, currency things. And then I think Mike Hearn, someone of Bitcoin developers, gave you a talk about like how things you could do in Bitcoin, and among them were like DAOs and programmable money, and it was that what got me really excited about the future of cryptocurrencies. But it just so happened that I kept expecting it to happen in Bitcoin. It didn't, and I finally found like a little white paper of some guy named Vitalik that was like 19, and then I basically stopped everything and decided, you know what, I need to work with that guy, and I need to work on this thing. And then I joined the Ethereum Foundation in 2014. That was after the pre-sale, so among probably the first employees. I think I was like employee number three of the GAF team. So I got, which helped me, like, gave me like a front row seat to a lot of the interesting and cool things that happened, including the first big DAO, the DAO hack, and then ENS and other things. So that is the short version of what I am, what I do.
That's awesome. So you've been around Ethereum about as long as it's possible to be around Ethereum, huh?
Not, I mean, when I came, I thought that Ichiban had a long, complicated history full of drama and a backstory, and I sort of like, oh no, it's too bad that I sort of missed the good parts, right? Because I started working on Ethereum when like I started like helping volunteering when it was like just a few people on forums, but I only started like working for the foundation after the pre-sale. And like if you read the books, a lot of drama happened in that like pre-sale, like Bitcoin Miami, and then the houses and the pre-sale. So I am not among that crazy group of founders.
You miss most of the Infinite Machine story, most of that section.
Yeah, yeah. I did get to a little bit of the Laura Shin one, so that was fun.
Cool. That's awesome. Um, well, that's probably a good lesson for people today. Like, I kind of started being a hobbyist like a year and a half ago, and only full time started working 6 months to a year ago. And you know, I think I felt late. I feel late, but I think by the time it's all said and done, we're we're gonna feel very early.
Yeah, it's interesting. Whenever you ask someone, when did you get involved in cryptocurrency? Usually they will respond something like, "Oh, I first read it when it first really went mainstream." But when it first really went mainstream, really depends on the person who's looking at it, right? Like for me, like when I started listening about like Bitcoin, there was like a Planet Money podcast about it. There was like a Good Wife episode about it. So it really felt, oh yeah, Bitcoin is getting into the mainstream. Like everybody's talking about cryptocurrencies now. But that was like 2015, 16. So it was not like mainstream by our standards. But whenever you join, if you feel that, oh, it's mainstream now, be aware that probably everyone who joined felt that everyone was talking about it. It's just that when it reached your bubble, I mean, usually when it reaches your bubble, it has like this sticky power in which you keep hearing about it, and you keep, oh my god, I need to know more about this.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think even before 2015, 16, I remember hearing about the Silk Road just like everywhere, and that whole story. So you're absolutely right. Um, well, that's amazing. And oh, go ahead. Sorry.
It's funny how like to be early in crypto, either you were a developer or just a drug buyer, right? A drug consumer.
Yeah, I tell people that, like, actually, because, you know, Web3, I have a decade of experience doing Web2 stuff. And, like, when I try to explain the ways in which the culture is actually profoundly different, there's two things I talk about. I talk about how much open source there is. So I'm like, imagine like open source, but on steroids in terms of the culture. Um, and then the other thing I tell them is that like a lot of the early people used Bitcoin first on Silk Road. So you just know that.
I once met a guy who told me, "Oh, I first met Bitcoin when I was purchasing some goods I was interested in." And I was like, "Yeah, those goods are probably quite expensive today." And he said, "Yeah, I spent probably like 5 Bitcoin on consumable goods."
Yeah, that's also like when I a personal opinion I have is that like the moneyness meme flows from utility, not the other way around. And like I talk about that, I'm like, Bitcoin had utility. Like that was a very legitimate adoption, like the Silk Road, and then a lot of stuff that came after that with kind of Bitcoin as like the unit of account or like margin and stuff like that. It's only recently where it's like wholly, I feel like, dependent on the meme. But yeah, that's just like me sliding my like my take in there.
I do agree. Yeah, I do agree that like the social aspect of it is so important. Like the it's really about the community and the utility and what happens within. Like there's only value if there's a community around it, and that community can be of buyers and sellers. That community can be of just people wanting to talk about or trade. Or and whenever I try to introduce people about cryptocurrency projects, often the things they are stuck on are not the technical parts, but the social parts that we think comes from the technical are things like why is anything valuable? Why is this worth $1 and that other thing that is identical worth $100,000, right? They usually, and the answer is usually not on the technical side of it. It's just this thing has a community. This thing has like people who care. This other doesn't, right? And that is such a like a non-tangential thing, right? It's just so abstract to understand, like what exactly is a community, right? What exactly it does anything mean? And I think it's very interesting.
It's fascinating though because most people, once they accept this at least a little bit, then they start to realize that many other things in life are like this. It's not just cryptocurrency. It's just really obvious with like with crypto because it's very forkable and it there's no physical item. But in reality, like I think people are starting to wake up. Like in the United States, for example, it feels like this very real thing, but much of the underlying value comes from people's willingness to to participate and contribute and just like interest in in the community as a whole. So it's a really interesting worldview. I think once you accept that, I think that's one of the things that really blows people's minds. Like once they realize like the way that things accrue value in crypto, it's a very it's a very mind blowing like thing to think about the world, like prism to view the world from.
It's like why is anything worth anything at all, right? Why, like how much of our society is based on just belief that everyone else will also believe it.
Yeah, yeah, it depends on who you ask, but I think if you ask people who really believe in crypto, the answer is probably a lot of it. Their answer is probably a lot. Um, cool. Well, that's amazing. I loved when you mentioned that DAOs were one of the things, programmable money and DAOs were one of the things that you really got interested in at the start. And then you were around for the DAO. So would love to dig into the DAO side of things a little bit. Like, what was that first experience like? Or like your early experiences with DAOs, and then where do you think we are today? Like, I guess what's your involvement in DAOs today, and kind of where do you think we are on that journey as a whole?
Well, I'm always expecting that DAOs will be the next big thing people will be talking about, and it's almost as a lot of my journey was like if you go to the original like Vitalik's white paper, you see a lot of things that we are building now. All of them were predicted there, not because Vitalik was a great predictor, but just because that was a good snapshot of all the things that people were talking about back then. People were talking about markets, about tokens, about DAOs, right? That's where he came from. That's like color coins, master coin, and exchanges. Everything was what people were trying to build. And DAOs is, I would say, of all those projects, one of those projects, by the way, was naming a name register, which is like, uh, and I think DAOs is probably one of the least, the ones that haven't really reached the big like public opinion, right? I think people haven't realized them like how big this thing can be, because really, like, you can think about DAO, it's just like a corporation or a company or a club. It's just a way for people who don't really trust each other to figure out a way to handle money together, right? Um, and right now, most DAOs are very simple, or just like a few people approving. It's just a multi-sig, but DAOs allow just so much interesting governance to happen, and I think a lot of the a lot of the issues on the world are really governance issues. How often do you see a problem in the world and you feel, if you just get 10 smart people together just to think about that problem, we can probably come up with a better solution, right? You think, oh, how do we solve this thing in politics or that thing in politics? Can we just like sit down together and try to solve it? And the issue is not that, it seems that most of the times nobody's actually trying to solve that. They are just stuck in a governance process that can't really find a solution out of it, right? And that is the frustrating part of most of politics, I would say. And that is, experiments in governance is something that really excites me. That's why I'm really excited about experiments in governance using DAOs.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense, Alex. It's like governance is very painful today, perhaps, broadly in the world and also in the DAO space, but it could be one of the most meaningful things we could possibly make progress on. Like if we can make governance more permissionless, if we can improve the quality of people's collaboration, if we can make it more scalable, because like that's where it really starts to break down, right? It's like when the 10 people come together, it's great. It's once you start scaling up that things get really, really hard. So like if we can make progress on that within crypto by trying many things like we do, I think it will be very meaningful, and that's a big part of why I'm excited as well.
And it's wonderful because it's sort of a cross with open source and governance. We just launched recently an experiment in governance at ENS called ENS Small Grants, right? And it's just a very simple project. Anyone submits a grant, the top 5 proposals get 1 Ether each, right? And every month we do a new round, and then we switch a little bit the governance process on that round. And this round, we just had a simple thing where everyone votes for a project, and then the top most voted get them like are not good, and like get approved and get their grant. But immediately we realized, oh no, like this one vote, like you can only get one vote is no good. You should be able to vote to multiple projects, because otherwise, like you only can vote on one, and there's a problem. And then we realized, oh no, not everyone has their equal votes. People with too many votes can single-handedly influence it. And we are already discussing, oh, maybe we can use quadratic voting for this. We can use approval voting. We can do ranked choice voting. And in the physical world, it seems that those discussions are only happening in academia. And oh, maybe we could improve the election if we just change the voting method. And in crypto, those things are happening like every month, every day, every week, and it's so fantastic to be able to just test it real time. Yeah, approval voting works best on single choice. Oh, actually, ranked choice voting with pairwise works a little bit better, and we can try this and we can try that. And that experiment is exciting, right? You can just go to a country and say, you know what, I think we like it can we just change the voting algorithm? That's so hard, right? Just can we just change how the votes are counted? and it becomes a huge issue that reflects everything else. And you can just do a PR and discuss what's the best and fix it. And which is what I really love about just doing those constant experiments. Like you can just, you know what, let's fix this. Let's change this little tiny thing here, and let's experiment until we find something that works better.
Absolutely. Absolutely. If you just wanted to try ranked choice voting or pairwise voting or quadratic voting one time in one country, you would probably have to spend your entire life focus on nothing but that, and even then you'd probably fail. Yeah, that's super exciting. Actually, I'm really curious. I would love to dig into this ENS small grants program, because one theme that I'm noticing is maybe earlier DAOs, or like at the start of DAOs, all these votes were like yes, no, abstain. You know, there's three choices. It was like, do we want to do this thing or not? Yes, no, abstain. But what I've noticed is more action in these decentralized communities where it's more like open ended. Maybe there's many options. Maybe we haven't like already exactly decided, we haven't refined the choice all the way down to like yes, no, abstain, but we want to bring people in to this governance process on chain. But we don't have all, like, there's a lot of building to do there, you know, to like optimize that process like you're describing. So we'll love to get any thoughts you have there, or like for you to talk about what you've learned, like maybe what does seem to be working better or not. What are specifically the things you're trying with the small grants program?
So one of the things that we need also to think about how we, another way to think about it is, of course, there's the binary yes, no, abstain, but we should also question the primary thing that we are voting for itself, right? Because one of the main things that we have in like in, if we're talking about a country, usually you have like one choice every 4 years. Maybe you have one choice every 2 years on the other houses, depending on where you are, or five. Like, there's one choice, and the result is also binary, right? Because the result is binary, it sort of like makes sense that the options tend to be binary. But if we think about things like small grants or funding, the result doesn't need to be binary. So right now in small grants, we are doing a thing where you get 5 projects, they each get 5 ethers, and that's done. But ideally, I would like to move to another experiment where it's not that there's only those projects and they only get this, and instead you can move. For example, instead of getting one payment, what if we do a stream over 1 year or over 2 years, right? What if instead of uh, having to choose like who is the winner and who is not, like one would love to do an experiment is just take a stream of money. Let's say we have like $1 million, like $100,000 per month to give out, right? And instead of having like one specific goal, we could just do constant votings on ranked choice voting. Like there's always a constant ranked choice voting happening, in which at any point you can add support for any proposal, or remove a support for any proposal, or change your vote at any point. And during all the time, the top ranked projects always get funded during a stream, and the minute that they are not approved, they can drop off the stream, right? This is an experiment I would love to do, because suddenly it's not about you getting a single grant, it's about you getting like a salary, a job where you get paid every month or every second to do a thing. And then if you don't prove your worth, then someone can come up and like, if you're in the bottom toward there, you know that any moment someone can come with a better project and maybe like get that job and fire you, right? It's so almost like having a job in which you are always looking, oh my god, I'm in the bottom, I'm falling down in the bottom. If I fall too much in the bottom, if I lose another supporter, I'm fired, right? And 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 as an outsider, at any moment, look, I'm getting more votes, I haven't like gotten like higher, but then suddenly you pass the threshold, and then you get, yeah, I just need to make sure that I keep my level of work here, and then it doesn't fall. And suddenly everything changes, right? It's not about a governance of yes, no, abstain about a single faction, a single action that is happening at a single moment. It is really like support over a longer period of time, and I think this is experiment worth trying out.
I absolutely love that idea. I think it gets to the heart of one of the really big advantages of DAOs, theoretically, where contribution can be much more permissionless and real time. So instead of having these traditional employment arrangements where it's very permissioned, you have to like somehow apply to get the job, do a lot of paperwork, HR, blah blah blah. Um, and then if someone gets fired, similarly large amount of work, very painful. And then also like the contributions are very unscalable. It's like you have to get paid like some salary and it's fixed over time, blah, blah, blah. Like instead of this traditional employment, we have a situation where people can permissionly like learn, prove their worth, get compensated, and then also move on if if it's not the right fit for them. Like that is a huge opportunity for just like improving labor productivity, access to like equity, things like that. So that's incredibly exciting. I'm curious, like if you want to try that, let's say you're gonna like really focus on trying that at ENS right now. Is the barrier is the barrier are there barriers that are more like coordination within ENS, like people being okay with this, or are there more barriers on the tooling side, like you have to build this function to like hold the treasury and then do the voting, both, neither? Like how would you think about what needs to happen for this to work?
I think as everything, it's more on the tooling side and just starting it small enough that you can prove it, right? So one of the reasons that we funded this small grants thing is that we wanted to be able to quickly iterate, right? Like I want to do this streaming thing. Other people were like, yeah, but we can also do this other thing here. So we get a small budget, and we twinkle it and we change it every month, and then like we experiment with governance for like maybe we do quadratic voting, maybe we do A, B, and C, and then after that is proved, then you expand. So it's building the tool and then quickly iterating it and iterating and iterating and iterating until I am not proposing that, hey, we are going to take all the money in the DAO, in the NS DAO, and just put it in a stream. No, we're just saying, let's take this tiny budget and experiment around it. And if it works, we increase the budget and we experiment a little bit more, right? Because there are so many cool things that can happen. Uh, can I tell you about a second, like on one of my favorite unexplored governance projects?
Of course.
So you probably heard about Colony. They are a project that they've been on like for a long time now, and they launched multiple versions of their app, and I think they haven't like hit the perfect product market fit yet, but they've been doing that for a long time. They like, I think they still have like ICO money from 2017. And one of their papers, my favorite papers that they publish, it's called Budget Box, and it really applies what I think it's best described as a sports governance process, but for DAO, right? And the idea would be that you get a bunch of you get people in different leagues, right? So maybe you are the league of the project that gets $1, like $1,000 per month or whatever, right? Your budget is X, right? And then what you do is you basically, instead of voting on each proposal, you put them to battle each other. You basically say, hey, proposal A or B, which is better? A. Proposal B or C, which is better? C. Proposal C or A, which is better? A. And then after you do a bunch of pairwise comparisons, you get the rank. A little bit like the sports having like a league having a champion, right? So you put the rank, and then you get, okay, so the top projects by comparison, they turn that in vector, making a rank, are projects A, C, and D. And then you put them all on the rank, and then the top projects move to the upper league, and the bottom projects move to the lower league, meaning that if you were approved, you get your budget that you requested. But if you are approved on the top, let's say 3, you get swapped with the bottom league and the top league, and then your next budget you can ask for a little bit more. And if you, but if you are like your performance is very low, then you get into a lower league. So it's really a little bit like a sport. I'm not a sports guy, but it really looks like a sports championship, but applied to projects in which you battle 1-to-1 with each project, and as you grow up, you slowly go up the league, up the league, up the league. And I think it's such a lovely project, such a lovely paper, and I would love someone to build that also in the future.
That's very cool. In the United States, people call this like a bracket, like a tournament bracket. That's such a really, it's like a different way to get to the ranked choice outcome where like there can be multiple, um, like
Oh, but
it
a bracket is exclusionary, right? Once you lose
mm,
on the bracket, you stopped participating in the game, right? It's
yeah,
more like a points rank where you every project
mm,
participates in multiple like comparisons with every other project, and then from that you get the ranking. It's not only like you only compare yourself with one, and if you lose you're out of it, and you need to lose all of this. So it's not exactly a bracket tournament, it's more like a points tournament.
there's like a new bracket every time. It's like iterative brackets. Like every time one competition ends, a new bracket forms with all the people based on the outcomes of the previous bracket. It's like iterative over and over and over. That's really cool. And then can with this paper, is it possible to apply like different funding amounts basically depending on like that the outcomes? Like do all the projects end up getting ranked based on like how many everyone competes with everyone else and then you end up with a rank at the end and the budget's allocated accordingly, or like what are the possibilities there in terms of like what do you do at the end after the competition?
What happens is that your budget is according to leagues. So if you're in the A league, you get X, right? If you're in the B league, you get like a lower amount of on your budget. It's just like having like a bigger salary and lower salary. If you're in the C league, you get a tiny budget, and if you're in D league, you get nothing at all, right? You're just trying to compete to get on the C league. And what happens is that at the end of every like competition, you just swap the bottom of the A league with the top of the B league. So you get up and down. And then it means that like you get approved, but in the next round you get to ask for more, right? So you just say what you're gonna do with that money, and that's it.
Yeah, that's really cool. I really like the idea of doing it many times and but having the results be connected to each other. So like I think about Gitcoin grants rounds, but like in that there's like many opportunities for funding over time on a regular cadence, but then you could somehow like connect the results of the previous grants round directly to like the inputs of the new competition.
One of the issues I find on the Gitcoin round is precisely fighting apathy, because every time they get a new round, you need to reapply, you need to get a new person, you get to get new support, and that's sort of like you need to overcome donors and voters' apathy. Wouldn't it be great? Like maybe it doesn't apply to Gitcoin precisely, but I think for some outcomes, you might just want to keep on rolling, right? You just like if you had support before, you don't start from zero. You start with already some support, and then you get to like compete with the newcomers of course in a balance that gives newcomers a good chance to grow up. But I think there should be like a way in which like grants are rolled up on the next round. But I think you have to do that in small experiments, not just taking all Gitcoin's budgets.
Yeah, doing starting from scratch with smaller experience is a much better way to learn, to your point, because like there are many costs to changing the way Gitcoin works, and of course that DAO is thinking carefully about like how to do that. But you wouldn't just come in and be like, now we're using the like the sports box method, right? And rolling it from grant round because they're already at scale. But there's so many opportunities for other people like ENS or other DAOs. Like we've been talking, Dennison and Tommy and I at Tally about like just doing small stuff. Actually, it was who was it? Superfizz. He made this tweet 2 weeks ago. He was like, "Okay, gas is low. Here's what we're gonna do. We're just gonna like put an NFT that's worth 1 ETH in a multisig and just put 10 people that you know on the multisig and remove yourself and be like, good luck." Coordinate to extract this value, and you better figure it out, otherwise you'll have to pay taxes on it. But anyway, it's like a very funny idea. But the point is like, it makes me think like, can we do this like small amounts of money, just like, cool, we built the like sport like very primitive version of like the sports box. We're gonna like get enough people to put up like 5 ETH into it and just like run people through it. It feels like we can just do more faster than we have been.
But I think the problem with the experiment is also the problem with most DAO experiments, in that we think about like all the way. Like, when we think about our threat models, we always think, okay, how can anyone like take over? How, like, is it protected against hostile takeover? Is it protected against Sybil attacks? Is it protected? But really, your biggest enemy in most cases is just apathy, right? In lots and lots of cases, what happens is not that someone creates a super complex method for extracting value. They just, nobody cares, and there's like two guys there who are actually running everything, and they just get things done, or they just get the value because they are the only ones who care. They are the only ones who actually vote and things like that. And then you either get the value is stolen by the only like two people who care, or the value is stuck because like those two people who care don't even have enough power to be able to take over.
Yeah, the crypto traders like to say that the scarce resource is attention, and they're very right. Like that is a scarce resource, and like it's funny too. Some of these projects that are having challenges, it's like those are the success cases. Like people are on optimism, like talking about their governance forums. It's like that's working. Like people care on some level. Most projects die quietly. Yeah, to your point, with people just like losing losing attention, which is a good point. Like it's not just about innovating on like the mechanism, but also I think we need to build attention mechanisms into these like ideas. It's kind of related to the revenue problem, which is I think another huge underappreciated reason that DAOs die. Actually, is there's no ongoing source of funding. It's probably related to the attention problem, but like that's probably another piece to think about. Like as we try things, is like how can we build ongoing ways to like ongoing engage and drive some source of revenue so we can keep going.
So like you need to, that is fundamental on the DAO, right? Just like a creature needs to eat in order to survive, it doesn't make even like, I don't think it even makes sense for someone to be talking about a DAO if they don't see like a source of revenue or a source of fund, right? Or maybe you just want to get you just have like a big budget that you're gonna like expand over time. ENS doesn't have that problem because ENS was created, like the ENS DAO was created to manage the ongoing and currently registration fees from registering ENS names. So there is an interesting ecosystem in which ENS already existed, and like years after ENS was created, we saw, look, we have like this huge public good that we don't know who it belongs to, and like we don't want it to be private. We don't want to just be we don't want to have a company that just manages that money, and I think we won't be able to win if it is just a private good. So how do we do it? And then they launch the DAO, right? So I think that is usually the way to go, right? You shouldn't try to launch a DAO and then figure out what the DAO does later, right? I think the DAO should come as a solution to like something that you had no solution for.
Yep. Yeah. I think that makes a lot of sense. We talk about this with DAO tooling too. Similar but different. Like if you're building DAO tooling, you shouldn't build it for like uh yeah, for for just sort of like thinking about the DAO space abstractly, and trying to design for that. It should be for some like very specific problem that a DAO has, or even like a new DAO, like bringing the DAO to the market with the tooling. I think that's such an interesting way to like solve both of those problems, where you can like make a DAO whose purpose is to create DAO tooling that brings, and that's how you like bring it to market, and it also gives the purpose for your DAO. That's something I've been thinking a lot about lately.
And honestly, one of the most interesting things I see is DAOs that have like a huge treasury, but 90% of the treasury are tokens that govern the DAO itself, right? So the tokens have value because they are like governance tokens for a billion treasury, but the most of the treasury only has value because of the tokens. And I think there are a lot of DAOs who are like that, and it's like, okay, wait, where is that coming from, right?
Yeah, there's not underlying value there. Like there has to be some external source of value to the token, or it will just slowly compress over time to nothing.
Yeah, it is. It is like they say that like if you don't know where the yield is coming from, then you are the yield, and I love that.
It's so true. It's so true. Cool. Well, Alex, I could do this with you all day. Very interesting conversation. Really appreciate your time. But to make sure I don't go over and abuse your time, would love to transition to a couple of closing questions. So the first one is, and this is just broadly about the crypto space or DAOs. What's your favorite part about working in the role that you do in the space, and what's something that you don't like or that you want us to improve going forward?
So one of the favorite things I like about this space is just the fact that I can be working out from it, right? I am from Brazil. I grew up in Rio de Janeiro, and when I was in university, I was seeing like that like the best designers I knew and the best developers I knew were somehow finding like a way to get a green card, get a H-1B visa, and work at like on the United States and Europe, right? And my plan was, okay, if I ever want to make anything that has impact, I basically have two choices. I need to go to New York, San Francisco, or Berlin, or whatever, right? and 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 it's very limiting because like not everyone can do that. It's not easy to get a visa. It's not easy to get a work to be done. But even if you have the talent, and then suddenly when I started working at Ethereum, I was able to just reach out to everyone just because it was on the internet. There was not like a big corporate center in Zurich. There were just people on the forum. They needed help. I could help them, and then and then when it became a real job, I still could do it like remotely from my home, and like we did like once or twice like uh, on site on site work sessions because it just helped us like understood ourselves as a team. But just the fact that for the rest of the time, for the rest of the year, you could be doing that from anywhere. All you need to do is have like a computer and access, and I think that's so transformative, right? It just amplifies not only the pool of talents to anyone in the world, but if you have talent and if you have internet and if you have like a computer, which excludes a lot of people, granted, but it's so much more inclusionary than we had before.
Yeah, I love that. I think the internet enables this. Crypto takes it one step forward because you can coordinate around resources. Without necessarily needing like banks permission, etc. Super powerful. So I would love to hear what's one thing that you don't love as much about working in the space, or something you want us to like improve about, working in crypto going forward.
something I don't like working in the space. I think the main problem with like crypto is both great but terrible due to the number go up fallacy, right? The only reason we are all here is because like there is money in crypto and people there's money in crypto because people are speculating on that. But it also does mean that it becomes a real filter on to do anything as a crypto user. The first portal to get into crypto is an exchange, which sort of like filters out a lot of people, right? You the only way for you to work on crypto is just like you need to open up an exchange, and it filters out that mentality for, yeah, I probably need to be a trader. I want to like you start looking at the graph of buying and selling things, and and then a lot of the big projects and interesting projects only become, and it's a cycle because suddenly nobody talks about a project until that like whatever token goes up into a ridiculous amount of value, of some NFT is sold by some stupid amount of value, and then everybody's talking, oh, what is an NFT? How can I buy it and be rich also? And then more people come, and then like we are in a bubble, and the bubble bursts because everyone is like, oh, this is worthless. Why are people doing like buying things at stupid values? And then we start the whole process again, and it sort of sucks. And it sucks to be on the same boat as a bunch of like scammers and pyramid people and things like that. But it's also like, but it, but but it's also like part, right? If people weren't speculating and trading, we probably wouldn't have like this. Those bubbles are what have attracted people and have fueled the ecosystem. And I do hope that at some point we will be able to say that like DAOs are self-sustaining, and that the things we are building are self-sustaining, and they don't need to have like a number go up 10,000 times, right? Like ENS is just about domain space, and like you just buy a name and you hold it, like you use it for something. You don't need to buy it because you expect it to multiply it by 10 in a few years. Maybe like you can use like a lending platform, not because you want to leverage and go 100x on your trade, just because you want to you want to use your profile as a loan collateral to buy a car, to so that you can start a business, so you can lend money to a friend, right? This is really what I hope like we can build out of it. It's just like a normal financial system for people who just want to do like daily transactions, and not just, oh my god, I'm gonna sell this for $1 billion.
Well, I was gonna say I'm glad you brought up ENS because I think every project that has product market fit, a sustainable source of revenue is a huge win. It's like one step at a time, right? We have ENS, like we have, Uniswap. We have these primitives where it's like, okay, this actually makes sense, and that allows like one more person to work in the space and see product market fit. So it's like brick by brick, we'll get to like a place where, yeah, it's focused on the value, instead of monkey pictures. Cool. Well, my last question for you is what is your favorite place in the world and why?
Favorite place in the world? uh this is a hard question. Like, I love traveling, but I also love home, right? I think just being home, and home is just not necessarily the city I live in. It's just being home, being like with my things. I love going out and seeing the world, but after 2 weeks, I'm just wanna go back, whatever, like to my little pod. And I think this is probably the perfect combination to be able to stay in our little pods all day, and then like once every while we go out and see the world, and travel, and get to know this beautiful planet that we live on.
That's an amazing answer. The contrast is what makes it special. Cool. Well, Alex, thank you so much for being on DAO Talk. Yeah, I really appreciate it. And can't wait to share this conversation with everybody else.